Good morning, everybody. I have our next couple chapters of Thief of Always. It is so great to have you here with us. Let's get started. Chapter 26, A Fledging Thief. My hat's a little crooked here on hat day. That's no good. That's a little better. He was not alone for long. Mrs. Griffin and Stu Cat had no sooner vanished from sight than Harvey heard a voice calling his name. The air was still thick with dust, and he had to look hard for the speaker. But after a little time he found her, stumbling towards him. Lulu? Who else? She said with a laugh. The lake's dark water still soaked her from head to foot, but as it ran from her body and into the ground, the last traces of her silver scales went with it. When she opened her arms to him, they were human arms. You're free, he said, running to her and hugging her hard. I can't believe you're free. We're all free, she said, glancing back towards the lake. An extraordinary sight met his eyes, a procession of laughing children coming towards him through the mist. Those closest to him were all but returned to their human shape, those behind them still shaking off their fishiness step by step. We should all get out of here, Harvey said, looking towards the wall. I don't think we'll have any trouble getting through the mist now. One of the children behind Lulu had spotted a box of clothes in the rubble of the house, and announcing his find to the rest, stumbled through the debris to find something to wear. Lulu left Harvey's side to join the search, but not before she'd planted a kiss on his cheek. Don't expect one from me, said a voice out of the dust, and Wendell stepped into view, beaming from ear to ear. What did you do, Harvey? Pull the whole place down brick by brick? As he surveyed the chaos. Something like that, said Harvey, unable to conceal his pride. There was a roaring sound from the direction of the lake. What's that? Harvey wanted to know. The water's disappearing, Wendell said. Where to? Wendell shrugged. Who cares? Maybe it's all getting sucked to hell. Wow, Wendell. Not school appropriate. Eager to witness this, Harvey walked towards the lake and, through the clouds of dirt in the air, saw that it had indeed become a whirlpool. Its once placid waters now rigid with spiral. What happened to Hood, by the way? Wendell wanted to know. He's gone, said Harvey, almost mesmerized by the sight of the vortex. They've all gone. Even as the words left his lips, a voice said, Not quite. He turned from the waters, and there, in the rubble, stood Rictus. His fine jacket was torn, and his face was white with dust. He looked like a clown. A laughing clown. Now, why would I take myself off? He said. We never said goodbye. Harvey stared at him with bafflement on his face. Hood was gone. So was his magic. How could Rictus have survived the disappearance of his master? I know what you're thinking, said Rictus, reaching into his pocket. You're wondering why I'm not dead and gone. Well, I'll tell you. I did some planning ahead. He drew a glass globe, which flickered as though it held a dozen candle flames out of his pocket. I stole a little piece of the old man's magic, just in case he ever got tired of me and tried to put me out of my misery. He lifted the globe up to his leering face. I've got enough power here to keep me going for years and years, long enough to build a new house and take over where Hood left off. Oh, don't look so unhappy, kid. I got a place for you right here. He slapped his thigh. You could be my bird dog. I'll send you out looking for kitty winkies to bring me home to Uncle Rictus. He slapped his thigh a second time. Come on, he said. Don't waste my time now. I don't. He stopped there, his gaze dropping to the rubble at his feet. A terrified whisper escaped his throat. Oh no, I beg. Before he could finish his plea, a hand with foot-long fingers reached up from the rubble and snatched hold of his throat, dragging him down to the dirt in one swift motion. Mine, said a voice out of the ground. Mine. It was Hood, Harvey knew. There was no other voice on earth that cut so deep. Rictus struggled in his creator's grip, digging the debris for some weapon, but none came to hand. All he had was his skill as a persuader. The magic's yours, he said. I was holding on to it for you. Liar, said the voice from the rubble. I was, I swear. Give it to me, then, Hood demanded. Where shall I put it? Rictus asked, his voice a strangled croak. Hood's hand loosened him a little, and he managed to haul himself to his knees. Right here, Hood said, hanging on to Rictus's collar by by his littlest digit, while his forefinger pointed down to the rubble. Pour it into the ground. But into the ground. Rictus pressed the globe between his palms, and it shattered like a sphere of spun sugar, its bright contents running out between his palms into the ground right in front of him. There was a moment of silence, then a tremor through the rubble. Hood's finger let his captive slip, and Rictus hurriedly got to his feet. He had no chance to make an escape, however. Pieces of timber and stone instantly moved over the heaps of rubble towards the spot where he'd poured the magic. Several lifted high into the air. All Rictus could do was cover his head as the hail increased. Harvey was clear of this flying debris and might well have made a retreat in these few moments, but he was wiser than that. If he fled now, he knew, his business with Hood would never be finished. It would be like a nightmare he could never quite shake from his head. Whatever happened next, however terrible, it would be better to see it and understand it than to turn his back and have his mind haunt him with the imaginings to his dying day. He didn't have to wait long for Hood's next move. The hand holding Rictus's neck suddenly let him go, and in a flash was gone from sight. The following moment, the ground gaped and a form appeared, haunched over as it climbed out of its tomb of rubble. Rictus let out a cry of horror, but it was short. Before he could retreat one step, the figure reached for him, turning to face Harvey. It held its traitorous servant high. Here, at last, was the evil that had built the holiday house, shaped more or less like a man. He was not made of flesh and bone and blood, however. He had used the magic Rictus had unwillingly provided to create another body. In the high times of his evil, Hood had been the house. Now it was the other way around. The house, what was left of it, had become Mr. Hood. Chapter 25, The Vortex. His eyes were made of broken mirrors and his face of gouged stone. He had a mane of splinters and limbs of timber. He had shattered slates for teeth and rusty screws for fingernails, and a cloak of rotted drapes that scarcely hid the darkness of his heart from sight. So, thief, he said, ignoring Rictus's pitiful struggles. You see me as the man I was, or rather as a copy of that man. Is that what you expected? Yes, said Harvey. It's exactly what I expected. Oh? You're dirt and muck and bits and pieces. You're nothing, Harvey said. Nothing, am I? Nothing? Ha! I'll show you, thief. I'll show you what I am. Let me kill him for you, Rictus managed to gasp. You needn't bother. I'll do it. You brought him here, Hood said, turning his splintered eyes on his servant. You're to blame. He's just a boy. I can deal with him. Just let me do it. Let me... Before Rictus could finish, Hood took hold of his servant's head and with one short motion simply twisted it off. A yellowish cloud of foul-smelling air rose from the severed neck, and Rictus, the last of Hood's abominable quartet, perished in an instant. Hood let the head go from his hand. It flew up into the air like an unknotted balloon, giving off a farting sputter as it looped and finally fell empty to the ground. Hood casually dropped the body, which had similarly shrunk to nothing, and turned his mirrored gaze back upon Harvey. Now, thief, you will see power. His mane of splinters stood on end, as though every one of them was ready to pierce Harvey's heart. His mouth grew wide as a tunnel, and a blast of sour, icy air rose from his belly. Come closer, he roared, opening his arms. The rags that clung there were billowed and spread like the wings of some ancient vampire, a vampire that had dined on the blood of pterodactyl and Tyrannosaurus rex. Come, or must I come for you? Harvey didn't waste his breath with a reply. He'd need every gasp he had if he was to outpace this horror. Not even certain what direction he was taking, he turned on his heels and ran as another blast of sour, freezing air struck him. The ground was treacherous, slippery and strewn with rubble. He fell within 6 steps and glanced back to see Hood descending on him with a vengeful shriek. He hauled himself to his feet, Hood's rusted nails missing him by a whistling inch, and had taken 3 stumbling strides from Hood's shadow when he heard Lulu calling his name. He veered in the direction of her voice, but Hood caught the collar of his jacket. "Got you, little thief!" he roared, dragging Harvey back into his splintery embrace. Before Hood could catch a better hold, however, Harvey threw back his arms and pitched himself forward. Off came the jacket, and he made a third dash for freedom, his eyes fixed on Lulu, who was beckoning him towards her. She was standing on the edge of the lake, he realized, perched inches from the spinning waters. Surely she didn't imagine they could escape into the lake. The vortex would tear them limb from limb. "We can't," he yelled to Lulu. "We must," she yelled back. "It's the only way." He was within 3 steps of her now. He could see her bare feet slithering and sliding on the slimy rock as she fought to keep her balance. He reached out for her, determined to snatch her from the perch before she fell, but her eyes weren't on him. They were on the monster at his back. "Lulu," he yelled to her, "don't look!" But her gaze was fixed upon Hood, her mouth agape, and Harvey couldn't help but glance back to see what fascinated her so. Hood's pursuit had thrown his coat of rags into disarray, and there was something between its folds, he saw, darker than any night sky or lightless basement. What was it? The essence of his magic, perhaps, guarding his loveless heart? "Do you give up?" said Hood, driving Harvey back onto the rocks beside Lulu. "Surely you would not choose the vortex over me." "Go," he murmured to Lulu, his gaze still fixed on the mystery beneath Hood's coat. He felt her hand grasp his for a moment. "It's the only way," she said. Then her fingers were gone, and he was standing on the rocks alone. "If you choose the flood, you will die horribly," Hood said. "It will spin you apart, whereas I—" He extended an inviting hand to Harvey, stepping up onto the rock as he did so. "I offer you an easy death, rocked to sleep in a bed of illusions." He made a smile, and it was the foulest sight Harvey had ever seen. "Choose," he said. Out of the corner of his eye, Harvey glimpsed Lulu. She had not fled as he thought. She'd simply gone to find a weapon, and she had one. A piece of wood dragged out of the rubble. It would be precious little use against Hood's enormity, Harvey knew, but he was glad not to be alone in these last moments. He looked up at Hood's face. "Maybe I should sleep." Wow, I read that in the wrong voice. "Maybe I should sleep," he said. The Vampire King smiled. "Wise little thief," he replied, opening his arms to invite the boy into his shadow. Harvey took a step over the rock towards Hood, raising his hand as he did so. His face was reflected in the shattered mirrors of the vampire's eyes. 2 thieves in one head. "Sleep," Hood said. But Harvey had no intention of sleeping yet. Before Hood could stop him, he grabbed hold of the creature's coat and pulled. The scraps came away with a wet tearing sound, and Hood let out a howl of rage as he was uncovered. There was no great enchantment at his heart. In fact, there was no heart at all. There was only a void, neither cold nor hot, living nor dead, made not of mystery, but of nothingness. The illusionist's illusion. Furious at this revelation, Hood let out another roar of rage and reached down to reclaim the rags of his coat from the thieves' hands. Harvey took a quick step backwards, however, avoiding the fingers by a whisker. Hood came raging after him, his soul squealing on the rocks, leaving Harvey with no choice but to retreat another step, until he had nowhere to go but the flood. Again, Hood snatched at the filched rags, and would have had both coat and thief in one fatal grasp had Lulu not run at him from behind, swinging the timber like a baseball bat. She struck the back of Hood's knee so hard her weapon shattered on the impact, pitching her to the ground. The blow was not without effect, however. It threw Hood off balance, and he flailed wildly, the thunder of the vortex shaking the rock on which he and Harvey were perched and threatening to toss both of them into the water. Even now, Hood was determined to claim his rags back from Harvey and conceal the void of him. "Give me my coat, thief," he howled. "It's all yours," Harvey yelled, and tossed the stolen rags towards the waters. Hood lunged after them, and as he did so, Harvey flung himself back towards solid ground. He heard Hood shriek behind him and turned to see the Vampire King, the rags in his fist, pitch headfirst into the frenzied waters. The maned head surfaced a moment later, and Hood struck out for the bank. But strong as he was, the vortex was stronger. It swept him away from the rocks, drawing him towards its center, where the waters were spiraling down into the earth. In terror, he started to plead for assistance, his pitiful bargains only audible when the whirlpool carried him towards the bank where Harvey and Lulu now stood. "Thief!" he yelled. "Help me, and I'll give you the world, forever and ever." Then the ferocity of the waters began to rip at his makeshift body, tearing out his nails and rattling out his teeth, washing away his mane of splinters and shaking his limbs apart at the joints. Reduced to a living litter of flotsam and jetsam, it's just like debris floating in the water, he was drawn into the white waters at the whirlpool's heart, and shrieking with rage, went where all evil must go, at last, into nothingness. On the shore, Harvey put his arms around Lulu, laughing and sobbing at the same time. "We did it," he said. "Did what?" said a voice at their backs. They looked around to see Wendell wandering towards them, blithe as ever. Every article of clothing he'd found in the rubble was either too large or too small. "What's been going on?" he wanted to know. "What are you laughing at? What are you crying for?" He looked beyond Harvey and Lulu in time to see the last fragments of Hood's body disappear with a fading howl. "And what was that?" he demanded. Harvey wiped the tears from his cheeks and got to his feet. At last, he had a purpose for Wendell's perpetual reply. "Who cares?" he said. And that is the end of 25. Let me see here. I'm trying to decide if I want to finish this. I think I would like to read this with you during class tomorrow. I think that would be a great way to end our online learning. All right, guys. Well, it has been a pleasure reading online. Thank you so much for keeping up with the videos. I've been impressed by those of you that are doing your best in this crazy time. I really appreciate you all. Thank you for being great communicators. Thank you for being hard workers. This is such a weird time, and I'm so proud of you for taking your learning seriously and doing your best every day. I hope you have a great break. I'm sure I'll see you back here tomorrow. All right, guys, take it easy. We'll see you. Enjoy Hat Day. Tomorrow is holiday gear. I got to find an ugly sweater. Uh-oh. All right, guys, take it easy. Have a good day.